Hey guys, welcome back to Fantasy Tips. Julian here for another exciting episode. This one we're talking about goaltending depth charts. And why are we talking about goaltending depth charts? Well, the goaltending position over the past few years in the NHL has been an absolute carousel. Every single offseason, there's so much movement and so many goalies going from place to place that it's really hard to follow. So in this episode, I basically list for you the number one, the number two, and the number three goalies on every NHL team to make it super easy for you to know who is that number one goalie that you should be drafting if you do want to draft a goalie from that team. And then during the season, if you want to be streaming goalies, you know who the second stringer is, and you know who the third stringer is if there is an injury. Definitely important information to know. Before we get started, guys, please drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you do want to take your support to the next level, consider hitting that join button on YouTube or hit that join button in my Patreon. The link to my Patreon is in the description below. And yes, I'm finally turning on that join in YouTube. Just make sure to provide me with your email address. That way I can include you in all the exclusive benefits that I listed for my Patreon and YouTube members. So first, let's take a look at the depth chart of the Anaheim Ducks. And I have Lucas Distel as the starter this year, although I think it's going to be a very close split of starts between him and John Gibson. He's probably going to get 45, Gibson 37. There's no way they're going to give Gibson that little starts. He's been their starter for so many years. But I do think Distel kind of passes him this year in terms of total starts. And then Thomas Suchanek is their number three goalie this year. So in Boston, we have Jeremy Swayman, who's going to get the majority of the starts. I'm expecting about 55 starts for him, and then 27 starts for Jonas Korpisalo, who I do think has a decent year in Boston. I think just being on a better team will help him a lot. And then Brandon Bussi, who's never played in the NHL, is their third string goalie, if anything were to happen to any of those guys. In Buffalo, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen is going to remain the starter. He had an awesome year last year and showed exactly what he can do. James Reimer is expected to be the backup, where Devin Levi is expected to be the third stringer and the number one guy in the AHL. But if Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen gets injured, Devin Levi could definitely come up and get the majority of the starts. And then Felix Sandstrom is the number four goalie, which is just worth noting because he has some NHL experience, and Buffalo also gets a lot of injuries with their goalies oftentimes. Okay, then it's the Calgary Flames. Dustin Wolf and Dan Vladar are going to split starts this year. Dustin Wolf is definitely their goalie of the future and could have himself a really amazing year. For now, I'm seeing a start split of 45 to 37, but if one of them starts playing way better than the other one, they could definitely run away with a lot more starts. And then Devin Cooley is their third stringer. Had some starts with San Jose last year, so has some NHL experience under his belt. In Carolina, Frederik Andersen is that number one, with Peter Kochetkov being the number two and Spencer Martin being the number three. But Andersen's very injury prone, so Kochetkov's probably going to see half the starts. I'm projecting 41-41 split. That's if Andersen doesn't get injured. Even with the limited starts, Andersen could still injure himself. It's been a very consistent trend over the years, so he's a risky draft pick. But Kochetkov probably ends up getting more starts by the end of the year just because of that injury history. In Chicago, Peter Mrazek and Laurent Brossoit, I'm projecting a 41-41 split for those guys. Mrazek had an amazing year last year for Chicago. Played really well considering how bad that team was. And Laurent Brossoit has always been a really great backup, and this year gets the chance to maybe start half the games. So a great opportunity for both those guys. It's definitely going to be a great goalie battle. And their third stringer is Arvid Soderblom, who's just not very good. In Colorado, Alexander Georgiev will get the majority of the starts, with Justice Annunen backing up. Georgiev probably doesn't see 60-plus starts this year. I'm expecting closer to 55 because Annunen is a really solid backup. And honestly, if Annunen continues to play well like he did last year, he could steal even more starts from Georgiev this year. And Trent Miner is their number three goalie. In Columbus, Elvis Merzlikins and Tarasov are the number one and two goalies. Honestly, I could have put Daniil Tarasov as number one here because by the end of the year, I think Tarasov is going to have ended up starting more games. I think he is the better goalie, but I think to start off with, Merzlikins might be given a slight edge as that number one goalie. But I think Tarasov is a phenomenal goalie and definitely underrated. And I see the split being 45-37 by the end of the year, with Jet Greaves being the third stringer if anything were to happen to either of those guys. In Dallas, Jake Ottinger is that number one, and then instead of Scott Wedgwood, it's Casey DeSmith as that backup goalie, with Remy Poirier, someone who's never played in the NHL, as the third stringer in Dallas. In Detroit, I don't know at all what they're doing this year with their goaltending depth, but it is kind of crazy. They got 4 goalies that could all, in theory, be the starter over there. Right now, I'm giving Alex Lyon the edge as the number 1 goalie, but Cam Talbot could very easily become that number 1 goalie as well. Same thing with Husso and Jack Campbell. I mean, the preseason is going to be very interesting to watch with these guys to see who actually comes out on top as the starting goalie in Detroit. In Edmonton, Stuart Skinner is obviously the starter with Calvin Pickard as the backup and Olivier Rodrigue as the number 3. In Florida, Bobrovsky just won the Stanley Cup, obviously a phenomenal goalie, going to stay that number 1. Spencer Knight hopefully is ready now to be that number 2 after spending a lot of last season in the player assistance program. And Chris Driedger, who has been on Florida before, is a pretty solid number 3. LA's got Kemper, Riddick, and Copley as their 1, 2, and 3. I do think Kemper bounces back this year after a rough year last year in Washington. The Kings are a much better team defensively, so Kemper should be able to rebound. If he doesn't, though, Riddick and Copley are more than capable of absorbing the load on their own. In Minnesota, Philip Gustafsson and Marc-Andre Fleury are going to split those starts pretty evenly. I see Gustafsson getting 45, Fleury getting 37. But if there's some struggles in nets like there was last year, look for Jesper Wallstedt to get some starts. He's one of the most young and talented goaltending prospects in the NHL and definitely could make an impact. In Montreal, Montembeault and Primo and Hughes are the number 1, 2, and 3. Connor Hughes has actually just signed out of Europe, so it'll be interesting to see how he plays if he does end up getting that call-up. But I'm seeing Montembeault get about 50 starts and Primo get about 32. In Nashville, Sabres is probably going to get 60 plus starts once again this year. He's one of the best goaltenders in the NHL, with Scott Wedgwood being the backup and Yaroslav Askarov being the number 3 goalie. And then Matt Murray is the number 4 goalie. Just worth noting, not Matt Murray, the one that you're used to seeing with Pittsburgh and Toronto, the one that was on Dallas last year. And then New Jersey, they finally upgraded their goaltending situation with Markstrom and Allen as their number 1 and 2. Nico Dawes being that number 3. Honestly, pretty solid situation they're in right now. Markstrom probably sees 55 starts, whereas Jake Allen probably sees close to 27. Continuing on, we got the New York Islanders with Sorokin as the number 1 goalie there and Varlamov as the number 2. Marcus Hogberg is their number 3, who has some NHL experience in the past with the Ottawa Senators. Sorokin did struggle towards the end of the year last year and actually didn't play in the playoffs very much. Varlamov was that guy at the end of the year. However, I don't expect that to continue. Sorokin is one of the best goalies in the NHL. 55 starts to 27 is a pretty reasonable split once again this year. In New York, Shesterkin, Quick, and Domingue, that hasn't changed at all. They're the 1, 2, and 3 goalies. Might be the only team that nothing's changed. In Ottawa, Linus Ullmark is now their number 1 goalie, with Anton Forsberg being their backup and Mads Sogard being that number 3. Linus Ullmark probably starts 55 games this year, with Anton Forsberg starting a respectable 27. In Philadelphia, I'm seeing Urson and Fedotov splitting 50-50 until one of them really can break away and prove that they're the better goalie. Obviously, in a very small sample size last year, Fedotov didn't do so well, but he's definitely got a lot of promise and definitely can show himself this year. I think he becomes that number 1 goalie at some point this year and kind of runs with it. And then Cal Peterson is their 3rd stringer, got plenty of NHL experience as that number 3 goalie. In Pittsburgh, Tristan Jarry is that number 1 goalie, with Nedeljkovic being that backup. And Nedeljkovic did play a lot better than Jarry towards the end of the year, but I can't see how they don't start Jarry as that starter, at least to start this year. And then if he struggles, Nedeljkovic probably gets some more starts. But for now, I do see Jarry starting about 50 games this year, with Nedeljkovic maybe getting 32 or so. Larson is their number 3 goalie, who has no NHL experience. In San Jose, Vitek Vanacek and Mackenzie Blackwood, the former Devils tandem, are their number 1 and 2 goalies. I mean, Vanacek or Blackwood could be the number 1 goalie, so it could go really either way. But the splits are probably going to be pretty freaking even between the two of them. And then Magnus Krona is that number 3 goalie, who did have some starts last year with San Jose. Seattle's got Joey Daccord and Philip Grubauer. I'm expecting Joey Daccord to get a good amount of starts, probably about 50 this year, whereas Grubauer probably sees about 32 or so. And then Stezka is the backup over there, who's never played in the NHL. In St. Louis, Jordan Binnington and Joel Hofer, Colton Ellis are the number 1, 2, and 3 goalies. If Jordan Binnington continues to play well, That's probably going to be the exact split once again, 55 games for Binnington and 27 for Hofer. But if Binnington does struggle at all this year, look for Hofer to get some more starts. In Tampa Bay, Vasilevsky is obviously that number one goalie and will start over 60 games this year in all likelihood, because Jonas Johansson, the backup, is a very, very bad goalie, with Matt Tompkins being a solid third stringer who could end up actually winning that backup job from Johansson if he plays better in the preseason. In Toronto, Joseph Woll and Anthony Stolarz are going to be fighting for starts. I'm projecting a 45-37 split. That's how close I actually think it's going to be. Woll is a great young goalie, but Stolarz is one of the most underrated goaltenders in the NHL. I've been saying that for so many years. I think he's going to push for starts, which is going to keep Joseph Woll fresh and competitive for those starts. Matt Murray is the number 3 goalie who says he's feeling better than he has in a long time. So who knows, maybe he'll see some starts this year as well. In Utah, Connor Ingram is probably going to see about 50 starts to Vejmelka's 32. And Matt Villalta is that number 3 goalie if they need him. In Vancouver, Thatcher Demko is probably going to see 55 starts. I wouldn't expect much more than that. They want to keep him fresh and not injured. Seelovs is a very solid backup goalie. And Yuri Patera, who has some NHL experience with Vegas, is their number 3. In Vegas, Aiden Hill is that number 1 with Samsonov being the number 2. The split might be closer than you think, like 45-37. Samsonov is probably going to play pretty well for Vegas. He didn't play all that great for Toronto, but I'm expecting him to turn things around in Vegas. Akira Schmidt's a solid third stringer, and worth noting, Robin Lehner is still technically on the roster, but I don't know if he's ever going to play hockey again. In Washington, Lindgren and Logan Thompson, it's going to be a goalie battle this year. Lindgren had an amazing year last year, and Logan Thompson is a very good goalie in my opinion, so it's going to be a very fun goalie battle to watch, and for now I have them projected as splitting exactly evenly, 41 games apiece. Hunter Shepard is a third stringer who has some experience in Washington. Winnipeg Jets, Connor Hellebuyck's going to get 60-plus games. No surprise there. He's the best goalie in the league right now. Kaapo Kähkönen, probably going to get 20 games-ish. And Comrie is the third stringer over there in Winnipeg. I think it's like his 3rd or 4th time in Winnipeg now, but he's used to it. And that's it for this video, guys. If you enjoyed the content today, drop a like and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. And if you do want to take your sport to the next level, consider joining my channel and unlocking all of those perks. Thanks, guys, and I'll catch you in the next episode of Fantasy Tipped.